The tires screamed as Howard Hodges forced the old beat-up cruiser up the narrow sliding edge of Old Fork Road. The car's engine, complaining in harmony with its screeching wheels, polluted the air with both smoke and racket. Hodges usually loved being county sheriff of nowhere population none. It suited him. Miles and miles of boredom and not much else was all the challenge he could rise to. Hodges, now 2 years past prime retirement age, had long since accepted working till the grave's edge, and riding all over this mountainous desert hellscape was no worse than working at a grocery store or being a janitor. Actually, most nights, it was a lot better. Locking up his office early and driving into the night had really pissed him off, but a report of a woman who seemed to be in distress sent him venturing out into the rugged Arizona wasteland anyway. Being the law in a massive wilderness where there existed few to break, it was fortunate. Adding to it, his wife's concerns for his safety plus his overall health made this a great gig, most of the time. Hodges' brakes howled as he slowed to a crawl, turning down one of the countless old service roads that crisscrossed the miles of nothing that surrounded Bastine, Arizona. A turd-shaped group of townships clustered between factories and flatlands, stretching for what feels like an infinity in all directions. Switching on his brights, Hodges squinted as he drove center of the glaring tunnel of advancing light that preceded him. An actual shiver shooting up his back as he drove further and further into what felt to be a shapeless void. The cruiser's lights swam across the ruddy desert, stretching out into the slowly decreasing light. Each new hillside revealing a distinct landscape, startlingly different, yet somehow uniform as well. At the bottom of a long dirt road, the cruiser's headlights revealed a small woman hunkered against a tree root outcropping of dirt by the roadside. The blanket she was wrapped in screamed against the cruiser's glare, with bright blue swirls covered in freakishly violent streaks of blood. Her face ashen and her countenance hidden, as though her whole body somehow carried a shadow. Hodges yanked the wheel, sending his cruiser pulling off, then onto the narrow road before colliding haphazardly on a mound of dirt near the young woman, cursing to himself as he called out to the ghostly figure to his right.
Ma'am, you okay?
Pausing as he takes it in.
Are you hurt?
The woman, moving slowly, revealed her face as she stood, dropping the gore-covered blanket to reveal her blood-streaked frame. Her skin festered in whelps like fruit bursting through the lattice panel dough of a ghoulish cherry turnover. Stumbling, Hodges reached the woman in time to pull up the blanket to cover her, grabbing her arms as she collapsed into his girth, her hands reaching upward frantically, begging at Hodges.
My friend, they have my friend.
Her voice trailing into a shriek as she outstretched her shaking, bloodied arm.
Down there.
She whispered as tears streaked down her kabuki-masked face.
Please.
She whispered as she pulled him toward the startlingly out-of-place group of abandoned semi-truck trailers that littered the distance across the desert. Hodges' visions seemed to cross and uncross as they made their way toward the there he rationally knew wasn't there. Having driven these hilly, rugged desert roads, he was acutely aware of the ridiculous nature of what he was seeing. As they reached the dirty, rusty group of trailers, Hodges began to realize his error. They weren't, in fact, a group of rusty, dirty trailers, but instead a group of old-timey storefronts insanely placed where they could not be. Hodges, realizing his dreamlike stupor, accepted the anomaly of his strange surroundings, holding onto the wobbly young woman. They walked into the weirdly arranged town square. Hodges was hit by yet another disturbing revelation as he registered that he was in fact the wobbly one. Light ripped across the desert like an explosion, illuminating the awkward township in a celebratory glow. Carnival music screamed from the pores of everything, obliterating the silence as people burst from the dusty old buildings. Hodges barely choked back a yell as people marched out of the doors and burst comically from the open windows. He turned slowly, staring in horror as the crowd taunted him before reflexively yanking his body away from the young woman when he noticed she was smiling. Fear tore through his gut as he stared at the woman's oddly skeletal face. Reaching nonchalantly down, the young woman plucked a piece of muscle from her side before shoving the loose meat into her grinning mouth. Hodges' heart began to pound as he backed away from her into the crowd of dancing faces. The floor beneath him slowly began to come alive, bear traps bursting randomly in the ground, snapping like alligators from beneath desert dust, barely missing Hodges as he bolted into the faceless, cheering crowd of people. The bear trap screamed angrily at Hodges' feet as he staggered among the faces before stepping on a large trap door and disappearing into the sand. Laughter. Insane, malicious laughter invaded Hodges' pounding head as his eyes tried to open in the blaring glare of a carnival spotlight. As the stabbing beams of light began to fade, Hodges realized he was perched awkwardly on a platform. His hands tied behind his back as the crowd barked and spit at him. Directly beneath him lay a macabre array of broken metal and glass, jagged shards stabbing upward like angry metal teeth, glass sticky with blood and twisted like claws, ripping the air, waiting to joyfully destroy flesh again. Hodges shook his head, attempting to clear the nightmare that surrounded him. A faceless set of grinning, cackling teeth with a person attached stepped forward and grabbed a ball from the stand as the crowd began to chant. The ball slammed past the target, hitting Hodges in the side of the head before rolling off the platform into the pit of broken glass and metal beneath. Hodges' head, now bloodied, hung limp for a moment before snapping up as terror gripped his chest. The next ball traveled straight, veering slightly before colliding with the target on the makeshift dunking booth's bloodied wall. The platform disappeared from beneath Hodges, sending his body slamming forward and landing on the pile of bloodied glass and metal. Pain like 1,000 hells poured through Hodges' back and arms as the glass tore through his skin, puncturing his shoulder and turning his right lung into shredded muck. Rolling down the towering pile of shrapnel, he landed in a bloody lump in front of the old dunking booth. Hodges stared blankly, watching in horror as the crowds enveloped his trembling frame. The last sounds he would ever hear were his own deafening screams as the crowd began to eat him.